I believe in Jesus Christ. But do I believe in him for spiritual reasons or for artistic reasons, because I've actually played the part?
Something strange happened on the set of Jesus of Nazareth in 1977, and nobody could explain it. Robert Powell hadn't even finished walking onto the set when the noise stopped. Crew members mid-conversation.
You are now actually the perceived image of Jesus Christ at that time.
And it happened to be over Easter, and I was working with an Italian crew.
Extras laughing, technicians adjusting equipment, all of them went quiet. Not because anyone told them to. Nobody did. Decades later, the people who were there still struggle to put it into words. What they witnessed during the filming of this legendary miniseries wasn't written in any script. It wasn't planned, rehearsed, or directed, and yet it happened. On camera, off camera, in the desert silence of Tunisia, in the eyes of a cast that never quite forgot what they saw. Stay with us. What unfolded behind those scenes is more extraordinary than anything that made it to the screen. The man behind the eyes. In 1975, Franco Zeffirelli was sitting across from a relatively unknown British actor studying his face.
I had been watching this man, Zeffirelli, work with his actors. And I'm looking, and these fellas are sitting there, and this man, Mr. Fox, I believe his name was playing Jesus Christ.
Robert Powell had done television work, a few minor roles, nothing that would make anyone stop on the street. But Zeffirelli wasn't looking for a star. He was looking for something harder, to find a face that carried stillness, a presence that didn't demand attention, but somehow held it. Powell got the role. What followed was one of the most unusual casting decisions in television history, not because Powell was unqualified, but because of what the role did to him, and what he did to the role. Before a single camera rolled, Powell made a decision that most actors would never consider. He went back to the source, not to other films about Jesus, not to theological commentaries or academic papers. He read the Gospels slowly, repeatedly, and with the kind of attention a student gives a text he knows he'll be tested on for the rest of his life. He wasn't looking for dramatic moments to perform. He was looking for the tone behind the words, the quality of patience in how Jesus responded to hostility, the way silence was used as deliberately as speech. Powell later said that what struck him most was how rarely Jesus raised his voice in the Gospels. Power, in those texts, came from restraint, not volume. That observation became the foundation of everything Powell did on screen. From the very first week of production, Powell made another decision that surprised everyone around him. He chose to stay away from the rest of the cast. Not occasionally, deliberately. Every evening when the crew wrapped up and actors gathered to eat, talk, and decompress, Powell would quietly excuse himself. He went back to his space, reviewed the next day's scenes, sat with the words. People assumed it was shyness at first. Then they assumed it was method acting. But Powell explained it differently in later interviews. He said he needed the disciples to feel something real when they looked at him on camera. If they spent every evening playing cards with him and sharing jokes, that feeling would disappear. So he stayed apart, and something unexpected happened because of it. The actors playing Peter, John, Matthew, men who had been hired to portray followers of Jesus, began to feel a genuine, subtle unease around Powell in costume. Not fear, not discomfort. Something closer to the feeling you get when you're in the presence of someone whose authority you can't quite explain but instinctively respect. That feeling made it onto screen. Watch the disciples' faces in the series. They aren't acting reverently. They're experiencing something close to it. But Powell's separation from the cast was only part of what made his performance so unusual. The other part was his eyes. Zeffirelli had noticed early in filming that close-up shots of Powell's face held something extraordinary. He couldn't immediately name what it was. Then he realized Powell barely blinked. It wasn't accidental. Powell had begun practicing extended eye contact during scenes, keeping his gaze open and steady far longer than any normal conversation would require. The director encouraged it. A lighting was then designed specifically to make Powell's eyes appear luminous, catching the desert light in a way that created depth that felt less like filmmaking and more like portraiture. The result was a gaze that